The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with Tony Palmeri, and we're pleased to have Tony back after what seemed like a really long hiatus, but he was hard at work, he was not vacationing. And Gordon Hintz is here. Gordon this is his first appearance here. He's been here of course many times in the past, but this is his first appearance since being sworn in a few months ago as the State Assembly person representing the 54th District, which of course includes Oshkosh. So welcome.
Thank you, and
I'm
happy to be here.
Sure. Well, we want to talk about a lot of things, and I know when you asked to come on the show, there were some things that you wanted to talk about too, and they probably dovetail with each other. But, you know, you were sworn in a few months ago, and how's it been going so far? What are your first impressions?
Well, it's been going great, and one of the reasons, you know, thanks for having me on. Is, you know, I'm sort of at the 100-day point, and I think I have a reasonable idea of how things work at this point, and we're entering some interesting discussions on the state budget, and I think this is the time when we really have to try to get as much feedback from the public as possible and try to engage people. I mean, I think one of the things we always discuss participation during the election season in terms of voting, but we really never ask people to participate when it comes to a lot of the decisions we're faced with. And there are some large decisions at the state level. So, you know, and this is a time that I think if we can kind of raise some of the discussions and the decisions that we need to make and let people know sort of what's at stake, hopefully we can get, you know, I as a representative can get some feedback. You know, overall, there's certainly a learning curve and there's an adjustment. I don't have it all figured out. One of the things as a candidate, you know, you're asked your promises, your declarations, your statements, your values, and I think, Tony, you realize this as well. You make those, but then when you get in office, you're one of 99 people, and it's still very structured, and it's a system, and you have to play by the rules that are in there. And so, you know, I probably bring a policy background, maybe bigger than some of my colleagues, but it is rules and procedure and process that sort of drives things. And you know, the idea of an independent person operating alone isn't the case in there, and so that's been an adjustment. But you know, it's been great. We've had a lot of people from the community that have come down to Oshkosh, and that's the best kind of feedback I can get on issues. Whether it's, you know, the state associations that bring people down or just individuals coming down on their own. So there's more to do than you have time to do, but I've been trying to be active both in the district and in Madison, try to build relationships, find people that share you know, the interests of this community and try to figure out how we can work on that.
Sure. Well, I think you've been doing an incredibly good job so far as being proactive and involved and from a communication standpoint, and we'll talk about some of those things too. But what are the committees that you were appointed to?
Sure. I'm on colleges and universities, urban and local affairs, aging and long-term care, and judiciary and ethics. And you know, after the election, before we get sworn in, we kind of get to put in what community committees that we would like to serve on, and I did ask to get on urban and local affairs and college and universities specifically because I thought they were things that our community would be well suited. I know Greg and Carol in the past have been on colleges and universities, but I think given my background with the university and the importance to this community, that was going to be an important one. And urban and local affairs has been that's where we're discussing shared revenue, annexation issues, consolidation issues, a lot of the things that really impact our local budgets here. And so really interested in that one.
Let's talk about the College and University Committee for a second. We're taping on April 19th, and in the last couple of days there's been a semi-scandal breaking that on our campus, UW Oshkosh, the campus was essentially taking money from a lender in return for overly promoting this lender to the students, right? Maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, I mean, and I found out like everybody else, and I think that's part of the issue. But essentially, you've seen throughout the country a lot of student loan relationships with private lenders having sweetheart deals with universities for, sort of some preferred status or something. In this case, Chancellor Wells confirmed that it was on the up and up, but I think that it does bring into concern conflict of interest. What's interesting is, I've been following what's been happening in New York and a couple other states. How we do student loans in this country is incredibly inefficient and unfair. And when you've got a multi-million-dollar industry that's making money off 18-year-old students who largely don't have representation, I think we need to have some oversight and know about what is going on, and the fact that I'm not sure we have clear guidelines as a state about what's appropriate, what's not, is something that we need to clear up. So I don't think we should, judge the universities yet, but I think we need to kind of find out what's going on, and if we need to put rules in place that clear this up, let's do it.
But hasn't the problem been, Gordon, that we've allowed students to take out many more loans, but grant money has kind of dried up?
Absolutely, and that was you're absolutely right. Financial aid used to come in the form, 70% used to come from grants, 30% from loans, and now it's vice versa.
It's vice versa now.
Right, about 70% from loans. So you're having people leave with more debt, and then when you raise the issue, well, are we even getting the best rate on those loans because of some of these issues, then you become really concerned. And actually, Congressman Petri is someone at the federal level who's, I think, always been taking a leadership role on this issue, and I think you're going to see both federal and states really look into this.
All right, Cheryl.
Well, you've asked for, you've actually sent a letter to the chair of the University and Colleges Committee asking that a hearing be convened to investigate this whole thing and to make sure that students are getting, and their families too, since a lot of times they're paying the loans, making sure that they are getting the best bang for their buck. What are you hoping to come out of that hearing?
I just think and the university, I think, should want this as well. It's time to clear up exactly what's going on. We've had, each day that comes by, we seem to have a new example of a new relationship that existed or money that changed hands, but I just don't think we have an idea about, one, what is our state policy on this? This seemed to be an individual deal that was done with the financial aid office and the private lender. How are these things done? What's the oversight on it? And how can we make sure that we clear up this conflict of interest with policies that are in the best interests of students? And again, because it's been happening nationwide, I think we were probably going to have hearings, but given the news stories this week, I think sooner than later would be of benefit to everybody.
All right.
One other thing, can we just stay on
Sure. Absolutely.
universities and colleges, or colleges and universities for a minute? There's been some discussion of late about admission policies to the UW system as a whole, and whether or not it violates state statutes when it comes to racial profiling and that kind of thing. There were 19 Assembly people who signed a letter and sent it off to the Attorney General asking for him to investigate. You wouldn't sign that letter. Do you think that there is not a problem right now then, apparently, or?
I don't, and I don't think it violated the Constitution. There was actually another letter out, and I don't think I put my name on that one either, that supported the current admissions policy that we have, which does use a number of criteria as considerations with no dominant factor. The U.S. Supreme Court made that ruling in 2003 with regards to the University of Michigan's admissions, which I think confirmed that these, and this really just tries to standardize our policy as uniform with that. So I think there's some politics going on with this one, and the more attention that we spend on these kind of things, the less we're really getting at the heart of what I think is important to university students and faculty in terms of quality education.
What are the politics that you see?
Well, we have a variety of feelings about affirmative action, about immigration in this country. Some of my colleagues on the other side do like to bring these issues up. At no point was anybody going to be excluded because of any of the criteria in admissions on whether it was income or race or high school background. But you can get some headlines with some of these things. It really sensationalizes points that I don't think are the key issues that we should be discussing. So I think the chair just sent out a letter today regarding a conference that the university is having on immigration, saying it didn't have enough, I guess, protectionism advocates or anti-immigration speakers.
One thing I don't understand is if we have favoritism for minority applicants in the UW system, why are there so minorities in the UW system? For people who think that we go out of our way,
Right.
it doesn't seem to be succeeding. Isn't that correct?
Especially the comprehensive schools, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and one of the things we have to do is it's not how, it's not just the university admissions process for those kind of things. I mean, I think we all like to see that we have, quality K through 12 institutions throughout the state, and I think the real disparity is in those school districts and preparing people for college.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the budget.
Sure.
And we're going to get into specific budget items, but the legislature right now is in really the beginning stages, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Before we get into specific items of the budget, can you just maybe run our viewers through the process? How is this budget ultimately going to get put in place?
And and it's a great time to have that conversation. In November after the election, every department in the state makes requests that they think are, what they need for their budget to continue. The governor then has 2 months to review those requests and decide which programs we're going to fund, how we're going to pay for them, and then on February 13th this year, I believe, he rolled out, his budget for the state of Wisconsin. The Joint Finance Committee, which is made up of 8 Democrats and 8 Republicans, because the Senate's in the hands of the Democrats, the Assembly, of which I'm a member, is in the hands of Republicans. They've just finished holding their hearings around the state, getting feedback. I went up to Green Bay last Thursday. Okay. They review the items in the budget. They make their changes to the budget, and then the Assembly and the Senate will vote on those, and then the governor will have his chance at final say on veto or line item veto. There are a lot of, one of my biggest concerns right now, and we are at the beginning of things, is that there are a number of disagreements in the budget. There are some challenging things that if one thing doesn't get passed in the budget, it impacts everybody else. So in some ways the governor sort of set things up in a way that makes it difficult to amend without changing everything. I know Senator Ellis has made some points that maybe we should just start over as a legislature. My biggest fear, especially for local leaders here, is that the last time that we had divided government like we have, and it looked like we had a budget process that was going to be complicated, is the budget wasn't passed, I think, until October 29th, and I think that was in 1999. When you're talking about city government, the county, school district getting ready to make their budgets, and you're not finding out whether you have a 0% levy freeze, a 2%, a 4%, what state aid is going to be, whether the school district is going to get their 2/3 funding or not, that makes it very difficult for you to be walking on eggshells, really trying to figure out your planning for the district. So I'm hopeful that if the Assembly and the Senate can at least take parts of the budget and agree on them, that we can move forward, especially with regards to the budgets that impact local government. Okay. But right now I'm worried, and that seems to be kind of where things are.
Just to make sure our viewers understand, will the Assembly and the Senate each pass their own version of the budget?
Correct.
And then what happens? Now they've got 2 different versions of the budget, then what happens?
When there's 2 different versions of the budget, and then there will be a conference committee to reconcile the differences, and then they have to go through each house again to be approved. That's
what takes it so long.
Correct. And even getting joint finance to iron out, 8 Democrats, 8 Republicans. I mean, in our most optimistic sense, we should hope that compromise would rule the day.
Well, Ellis, you mentioned Mike Ellis, the Republican senator from Neenah. He says throw the budget out and start over because the governor is relying on accounting tricks. Do you agree with Ellis?
Here's my basic concerns with the governor's budget. Look, there are a lot of good programs in there, and there are cases to be made. There are tax cuts, tax exemptions. There are also new fees. It is a 2-year budget the way I look at it. And again, I come from city government where maybe it's a little easier to look at 2 to 4 to 6 years down the road when you're talking about there's different people in office every 2 years and in my current job. But I don't know whether it puts us on any long-term fiscal, I mean, it has reduced certain commitments, it has reduced our structural deficit, but there are some revenues on there that I'm not sure, the cigarette tax, there's a case to make in increasing the cigarette tax from a health standpoint, but where is that revenue going to be 2, 4, 6 years? And are we putting that money towards programs that are going to be going up in costs? Because those are the same kind of things that got us in trouble in the 90s. So, it gets us through the next 2 years. It funds certain programs, but I can't disagree with Senator Ellis in terms of some of my concerns from a budgeting standpoint. And I think there's some assumptions made in it that I have questions about. I wish we could get together and say, what are our goals 2, 4, 6 years? Why don't we have a reserve fund at the state level when other states do to protect against rainy day budgets, especially when we really not sure where the economy's heading right now.
But Ellis always suggests that there's too much largesse in the budget, that we should just be making cuts, and of course he conveniently never says where the cuts should come. So as you looked at the budget, have you noticed places in that budget that really need to be targeted for major cuts?
Again, it's hard to start out with that. I think we need to look at delivery of services. I think we do have to look at how much we are spending in areas like corrections. I mean, one of the things you realize as a new person to the legislature is, and I said this when I used to teach, but the federal government and state government has gotten larger over time at every level, over history, largely because people have supported it. That doesn't mean they support tax increases, but for instance, we have plenty of examples now with regards to GPS monitoring for sex offenders, for DNA analysts, and there's a great compelling case to be made, at least for the DNA analysts, that who's going to say we should let a murder or a rape go 8 months without investigation?
Right.
Those things cost money, and the same people that are saying, oh, we can't afford this, we can't increase this, back that and put out a press release that they're tough on crime. So we need to have a realistic dialogue about how much we're spending, how much money we really have, and understand that cutting one or increasing one thing, the money has to come from somewhere. And that's what I mean about involving people in these decisions, because in the big items in the budget, there's a case to be made for a lot of those, and because local impact, I mean, if the state cuts back on K through 12 spending, the school district will have a decision to make on increasing property taxes or cutting services, and the same with the city. Okay. And so it's not, these aren't simple decisions, but we're not having the conversation we maybe should be.
One more general question, Cheryl. 4 years ago, the governor, when he first ran for office, said that he was going to dramatically cut the state workforce. And what has happened, apparently, is that state worker responsibilities have been replaced by private consultants, which have cost the state more money. Is the legislature going to do something to rein this in? You would agree that the private consultants are costing us more than what the state employees.
In the examples that were initially cited for outsourcing and when it is considered, and I think I know the ones you're talking about, there were the cost savings that may have been proposed were not achieved, and it's probably stopped further efforts there. I think, 2,500 were originally cut out of the 10,000, but a lot of those were, through retirements and through vacant positions.
Right.
I don't know where again, I don't know if we're asking the right question there about, I think it's what kind of service do we want provided, not how many employees should we have. And I think it's about asking the right questions in that case.
Well, go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, you are going to be holding some budget hearings, and we're going to talk about those very shortly. But what have you been hearing, if anything, so far in your first 100 days of work here in the district?
And that's one of the interesting parts of the job is I'm always like, I wonder what I am going to hear from people. And I think some people are still trying to figure out, who their new representative is. I make I don't expect everybody to, I get letters that say, Dear Greg Underheim. And I mean, it's not, you can knock on as many doors as possible and send everybody a bunch of mail, but it doesn't mean it's going to take a while for them to realize who you are. A lot of them are individual concerns. I mean, a lot of people are mobilized by, the groups that contact them, the governors included, autism, coverage group insurance should provide coverage for autism. So I hear people that have autistic kids making this case, people that support the cigarette tax, people that are against the cigarette tax. It's usually individual items that impact them. I mean, most people are motivated most by the decisions that government makes that have a direct impact on them. So people are concerned about spending. Some people are concerned about individual items that are in the budget that they want. And I said this the other day when I sort of gave a talk about my first 100 days. We all sort of, whenever someone gives a political answer and they don't answer a question, we kind of groan and say like, I wish they would just give a straight answer. And so you really have done my best to give the straightest answer I can, but I will be honest that some of the issues that come across, and including some of the items in the budget, I may just not know enough about without having a hearing on it or consideration. And that's happened more than I thought. It's not that I don't want to take a position, but some of these things, I mean, the people out there in our community are more familiar with because they're directly impacted by it than a lot of the people in there. And we need their feedback and their information, but I also need to consider what the other side of it is. So, look, people are concerned about taxes. They're concerned about fees. They're concerned about what it's going to mean for them. They're concerned about health care. I got a 4-page handwritten letter from someone who lost their job the other day, who just thought the sorry state of not having access to health care was deplorable, and it was really heartfelt. And I'm going to try to, she didn't leave a phone number, but I'm certainly going to get back to her with as much as possible, and not just a response, but seeing if there's anything the state can do assistance-wise.
Sure. But see, one of the criticisms of your predecessor, Mr. Underheim, and Cheryl and I were two of the people that made the criticism, and this criticism has been made of Carol Ressler also, is that they would vote for budgets that were bad for the city of Oshkosh. So that the last 2 or 3 budget cycles, no increase in shared revenue, probably a real reduction, these insane levy limits, and yet our state reps vote for these budgets. So can you pledge to our viewers that if this budget coming through the cycle is not good for Oshkosh, you won't vote for it?
I will pledge to you that if the budget is not good for Oshkosh, I will not vote for it, but there's a lot of different considerations to make, and in that consideration. Right now, I'm trying to make the case both to joint finance members and to some of my colleagues on items that I think are important in the budget, like I do on other issues, to get the best in the budget for our community. Now, overall, and that's why,
what if you don't get those things?
Some people vote against the budget, but then take credit for individual items, and I didn't understand that until now, because you're still trying to get the items in there in the best possible way, but there may not be enough overall. You need to make a decision on whether that's something you can support comprehensively. When you're talking about $58 billion, there's a lot in there.
So what items are you trying to get?
Well, certainly trying to maintain city support, if not increase it. I'm certainly trying to maintain the university funding, which goes up for the first time in a long time. Priorities that I think are there for this community.
Well, let's start with the levy. The last the last budget it was a 2%.
Correct.
Right, cap on cities. The governor proposed 4%.
With a slight increase in shared revenue.
All right. What's going to happen in the legislature with that proposal? The Democrats in the Senate will probably support the governor, right?
I think that's something the Democrats would support. I'm not sure whether it could get reduced back down to 2 or 3%, something less than that, because that would seem to be a victory that some could take. There really is I'll tell you this, at the state level, there's very little consideration for mandates to local government or cost increases to, I raise my hand every time I get a chance to say, you just passed on additional responsibilities with no money. And, someone should remind me if that happens to me after being down there, but I'm very conscious of these things right now. So, I mean, there's a lot, I want to make sure that we get the best deal, but I understand that to get more money for Oshkosh might mean less money in other areas.
But one thing I asked you in the public forum, and I'll ask it here too, because I think it's a good issue for people to be aware of. The way our budget process works, the governor of the state of Wisconsin has extraordinary power, probably the most powerful governor in the state, in the nation. I don't think that's an exaggeration. So that if he proposes a 4% increase in the levy and the shared revenue, and the legislature says no, the governor could restore that on his own, couldn't he?
Through some tricky
Yeah.
works of the pen, and I should go on record and saying I voted to get rid of the
The
governor's
so-called-
power on that, even though I probably have agreed in the past with some of the governor's use of the veto. It restored funding to K through 12 education. But I do think it's an abuse of power that, as an institution, as the state assembly, we should oppose because it ultimately allows them to add money
Right.
back. I think that it'll be written in a way that makes that as difficult as possible. It'll be interesting to see. If they bring it back down, I think it'll be difficult for him to raise it back up to 4%.
Why?
Because it'll seem that politically that he raised property taxes.
Cheryl?
Well, and that
Yeah.
I don't understand why Doyle can't see this. He keeps wanting to hike up the levy. Does he not understand what he's doing to communities like Oshkosh? Does he not see communities instituting fees for this, that, and the other? Why is there such a disconnect?
The biggest problem is a discussion that we're really not having, which we really need to have, is that we are over-dependent on property taxes in Wisconsin. It's really,
Yeah.
it's not just about taxes and spending, it's about what type of taxes and how you pay for services. I mean, we've always been a higher tax, lower fee state, but now you're seeing fees go up as we don't touch things like income and sales tax for probably good reasons. But the property tax is the one thing that continues to go up, even as that's probably become the most regressive tax out there, because you have people on a fixed income, and you're seeing that their taxes are going up to, do an increasing portion of their budget. So, but yet that's the only way we can fund. That's the only way we in Wisconsin fund local government. Minnesota, 6.5-cent sales tax, much lower property taxes. I mean,
Sure.
Minneapolis, lower property taxes than Milwaukee.
Okay, so I understand about people on fixed incomes. We all get that, I think. But what's the difference if they're paying it on their property taxes or they're paying fees, for example, to have their trash picked up and hauled away? Either way, they're having to pay these types of fees, and at least if it's on your property tax bill, you can deduct it from your income
Correct,
tax.
and that was, I thought, and it was also a local control issue, but that was my problem with the freeze last time around, and certainly this time. But because we have these high property taxes, and because people don't like them, the state feels that they're in the best place to tell local government without doing anything to reduce the cost of government. They haven't done anything to lower healthcare costs, to lower fuel costs,
Right.
to do anything that might assist the city in making things cheaper. And yet they're going to put this mandate out there because it's politically popular. So
Yeah, I want to throw out some numbers that you threw
Yeah.
out at one of your forums, and I think this will be useful right now. Nationally, Wisconsin ranks 8th in property taxes. We're 9th in income taxes, but then on sales taxes, we're 38th out of the 50 states. We're 28th in fees, and in the state that's supposed to be a tax hell for business, we're 32nd in business taxes. So we're very high on property and income, but not as high in sales, fees, and business. So if we were looking at those numbers 20 years ago, the business taxes, we would have been higher on business taxes,
I
right?
think we would have been higher there. Sales
So we've
probably
cut
was
business taxes.
We have, and again, it's a lot easier for what you see is a lot of exemptions
Yeah.
that erode what taxes
I mean,
are
what
applied
I'm getting
to.
at, Gordon, is wouldn't you agree that over the last 10, 15, 20 years, largely through the Tommy Thompson era, we've really shifted the cost onto middle-class homeowners for everything?
Yes, and the one group of people who can't get that loophole, who can't get the exemptions, are the individual. I mean, for instance, and the Northwestern's been covering it. They just had the hearing yesterday on the paper companies exemption.
Right.
Would shift $2 billion of taxes, property taxes, to small businesses and individual property owners. We don't have that option. I can't get a houseboat and live on the river and get out of paying property taxes. Although that was my idea. And again, you have to understand that a lot of the services, especially local, it costs money. But every time we consider an exemption, and there is some targeted tax relief and some extensions for things like the homestead credit, but the middle class squeeze right now is tremendous. And when you look at, you're absolutely right, the shift over time. And I'm not saying that, we need to weigh making sure that this is a good climate for business to be in. But I always think when I hear businesses don't want to come here, I'm thinking the CEO doesn't want to pay property taxes on that nice house he's going to get, and maybe that's the deterrent.
That's a good point. Well, we want to talk about these budget workshops that you're going to be holding, and for the audience at home, you might want to get some paper and a pen and jot down the dates and times and places. They are on our website. But I recognize, as does Tony, that not everyone has access to the internet. So the first one, and each of these, they're each different items, open for discussion. The first one is coming up on April 30th, and I'll repeat these also for you folks. April 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. It's going to be held at Reeve Memorial Union, room 227A and B, and that is going to be for the purpose of discussing the UW system. What are you hoping to accomplish there?
Well, with all of this, and again, it's a work in progress, and if I'm fortunate enough to be in office for another term, I hope we improve upon this. But as I mentioned before, it's about getting people to try to understand the state budget and the decisions we're faced with. And as I was preparing for this, it was the more I dug into it, the more I'm like, God, this is so complicated. But we have to try to we have to start somewhere. And the forums I've tried to set up are based around what programs we spend the majority of our money on, and that's K through 12 education, medical assistance, Medicaid, Badger Care, the UW system, corrections, and shared revenue. And that's kind of how we're going to, I've done it in this case, so people understand, and with each of them, I'm going to try to anticipate questions, but how much are we spending now? What does this budget propose? What were we spending 10 or 15 years ago? To sort of understand, trends that have happened. We spend more on corrections now than we did 15 years ago. The medical assistance, Medicaid budget has been rising. The university has been flat or going down. State aid to cities has been going down. With the university one, I want it to be for students, for faculty, for those kind of questions. Can we put the state pie into what it means for UW Oshkosh? Students that may want to know, okay, how much would it cost us to freeze tuition? If we kept tuition at this year, how much would the state have to come up with? How should we pay for that? Is it worth freezing tuition? For faculty, how much would it be to replace academic staff with full-time faculty? They've been declining in terms of replacing faculty with actual faculty, with PhD professors. How much would it be to raise their pay to what the median is in the Midwest? So those kind of things, and then try to get an understanding of can we identify other things at the end of this? Is there something that's more important to us? And again. It's a work in progress, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but I think we need to go through this process, ask questions, especially for the students, because they really came out and voted this last election, and I think, a lot of times they don't understand that the decisions that impact them are largely impacted by other decisions in the budget.
Okay. Well, again, for folks at home, that is April 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Reeve Memorial Union, room 227A and B. K through 12 education, you had mentioned that. Now that'll be held May 14th from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening at the Oshkosh Area School District Administration Building over on Eagle Street. What are your goals for that one?
With all of these, because again, I'm certainly not the authority on a lot of these things. I've been trying to go to this, follow the school discussion closely. That one is to get really an understanding of the role that the state plays in funding our school district in terms of, how does this budget impact what we're in the middle of right now. And I need to meet with Superintendent Heileman, but when I contacted him, he was looking forward to the opportunity to discuss what's good about what the state does, what's bad about what the state does, and what we should really be looking at, because it was hard to listen to these discussions because, we're talking about sensitive items, about neighborhood schools, about taxes, about funding, about class size, and it's not, our hands are tied in so many of these cases. I think we're more familiar with it at the council level, but does this budget do anything more for us? What does it do? Again, I think we need to have a better understanding of what role the state plays in K through 12 education, and I want questions from folks too. And if we can't answer them that night, we'll certainly get back to them. But a lot of people have a lot of different feelings and ideas, and this is a way to sort of solicit that. But also, I'm going to rely on Superintendent Heilman and board members, and any of them, to weigh in on the state discussion as well. They're going to have a better idea of how the state impacts them locally than I am. But I think it can lead to getting us to understand what matters and what doesn't.
Okay. The remaining three then, we've got a discussion on Medicaid, and certainly that's been in the news a lot lately. That's coming up on May 21st from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening at the Oshkosh Senior Center in the Willow Room. And discussion on shared revenue on June 4th. You haven't got a location
we're hoping
for
to have that
yet.
at City Hall. I just
Okay.
and I've talked to our city manager and Ed Noakes about participating in that as well, and I think they're on board. So we're
Okay.
just trying to firm that up.
So that'll be June 4th from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening, and possibly at City Hall, but we'll let folks know at a later date. And then corrections, that discussion will be June 11th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., and that'll be at the Oshkosh Library, I'm assuming down in one of the meeting rooms?
Correct. Yeah, and that's where we had our kickoff. But in the basement of the library, all of these try to have them in public spaces with good facilities with enough space. But on all these items, trying to invite the local face of our community, our people from corrections and the resource center, including officers, the Medicaid budget, people from Parkview and from the county, and from our nursing homes, both public and private in the area, shared revenue, people from the city and county, to really sort of understand, speak locally to a lot of the other things in the budget.
Okay.
So.
Go ahead, Tony.
Well, I hope people do take advantage of going to these forums because they're very educational, and the way Gordon facilitates them is in a very interactive way. So you don't do all the talking. In fact, you encourage people to talk to you.
Right.
Right. That's very valuable. One big issue that's come up in the last month, and I know that you're very interested in it, is this AT&T attempt to dramatically change our cable access type of deal in the state. Explain what's going on with that.
Sure, and this would probably be the best example of learning how things really get done in Madison.
It's not pretty, is it?
As a new member. I think my third day in office, I had a meeting with AT&T, and my fifth day in office and my ninth day in office, a couple other people came in. Essentially, there's an effort out there that's been happening in several states to increase cable competition. Right now, you see the cable companies are getting involved in phone and internet. Well, the phone internet group like AT&T is also interested in getting into cable, but has had some problems in that. They have a new technology to provide cable through your phone line that they are trying to, but they have to get into the states, they have to waive the local cable agreements. Their effort, the goal is to open up competition, which would lower cable costs. The assumption is, I don't know,
Supposedly,
we
yeah.
have any, we don't know if that's true or not. In any of the states, it hasn't. We don't have any numbers yet, and some states have had it for 3 years. So now this debate has come to Wisconsin. I think we're the 10th state to consider having a statewide franchise fee. So instead of having Oshkosh negotiate with Charter or Time Warner or AT&T for the cable agreement, it would open it up. My concern going in was, great, I want competition. I certainly want lower cable costs for consumers. I don't want, I want the city to be held revenue neutral, meaning I don't want us to have to increase property taxes because we're losing right-of-way fees that we charge to every public utility or every utility out there. And the original bill of this, eliminated that. The bill in its current form, and it looks like we're going to vote on it Tuesday. There's been amendments made that protect. Originally the bill had a lot of problems with it. You would lose 72-hour consumer protection rights. The city would have lost several $100,000 of revenue. It didn't necessarily preserve channels like this that allow us to keep our government open by showing our board meetings and our council meetings, and to allow commentary on a lot of the things that we have right now. Those have been protected. The biggest problem, and I'm noticing that this is a real Oshkosh concern, is in 2001 the city made a new 15-year agreement with Time Warner, and with a franchising fee of 5%, and it also included 1% each year to fund infrastructure for OCAT, which came to about $1.4 million. Well, in 2003, when they made upgrades here at OCAT, they borrowed against those future monies because we had a good faith agreement made on $1.4 million. The current bill gets rid of that money that we've got coming. So we've got $450,000 that we've already spent because we made a good faith agreement, and I say we as the city,
Right.
that we're going to have to come up with unless we can get some changes to this bill. And I'm hopeful that there are going to be some amendments that address this. But to my colleagues, I sort of expressed, look, I support cable competition. I want to maintain right-of-way fees that we charge because I don't want that get to charge to property taxpayers. But by getting rid of this funding amount for infrastructure, we're going to have a choice to either increase property taxes or cut services. And I don't think that's fair. I don't want I want competition, but I don't want it at the expense of property taxpayers.
Sure.
So you see that this is one of the first major items that we're taking up because there's been a lot of pressure. People have seen the ads on TV for video competition. There's 27 registered lobbyists on this bill. An article came out in the State Journal that the lobbyists actually helped write the bill and worked with the bill drafters on this, with no one representing cities in there. And so, there's a lot of concerns on this one that not everybody's best interests were being taken into account. And I guess what's been disappointing to me is in other states, there's precedent for the kind of things that we want to make sure that we're protecting property taxpayers and maintaining the quality OCAT broadcasting we have.
What's the governor saying on this bill?
I have not heard. My guess, there's a lot of support for this.
There is.
There is, and it ranges from AT&T is a union shop, Communication Workers of America. Some people just focus on those things. Others are solely think that this competition's good. They're upset with the cable companies. Some people don't. We're in the Green Bay media market. If we don't have local coverage out of our city here, the Green Bay media stations aren't going to all of a sudden cover city government or county government anymore. And so, and I've heard from a lot of folks on that, and I've heard from a lot of folks, who want competition, who may not support cable access, but they have to understand that the revenue stream we receive goes to more than just our cable access. We, get money for the right-of-way that the providers use for
But the
this.
bottom line seems to be, Gordon, just make sure we're clear, if this bill goes through in its current form, this city could be on the hook for $450,000. Either we raise it in property taxes, I guess, right? Or we can cut OCAT.
We've already spent that much in anticipation of the revenue coming to probably pay off the borrowing we did on that. So, yes.
So this could be very bad news.
So get out your calculator, Tony, and you and your 6 counterparts on the city council are going to have to find some money.
I'm hopeful we can get a reasonable amendment on this. I don't think the intention was hopefully not to do this, but
okay.
So this show is going to air the day before you start voting on this then, and I also understand that it is probably going to be going to the Senate floor as early as the 25th. So we will be watching with bated breath to see what's happening with that.
We will.
According to the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, an estimated $1.7 million was spent on groups outside of the candidates' campaigns trying to influence the most recent Supreme Court race here in Wisconsin. And of course, there was also a lot of outside money spent on your own race with Julie Pong-Leschke last fall. Now, you're part of a task force to help regulate political ads, correct?
Yeah, not so much a task force, just a group of people that I think are committed to addressing this. Again, you're very self-aware when you first get in office about not wanting to become part of the establishment, reminding yourself what was good about why you ran, that you want competition, you believe in democracy. And I went through an election, and while I was happy to win, I don't think it's the best way to elect people. And I do believe that everybody should be able to run, and I can tell you that not everybody would be able to to run under the system that we currently have. But we currently have the system we have with tons of money flowing in because we allow it. 17 states have passed disclosure bills that put the kind of issue advocacy ads under the same campaign finance requirements that groups who spend independent money and candidates who spend ads do. And what I'm talking about with these are the ads that don't say vote for or vote against, but say, call Gordon Hintz and tell him, he's right, or tell him he's wrong, both the good and the bad. Those don't fall under our campaign finance guidelines, but we all know that they have just as much impact on an election outcome. I think in 2002, I forget the number, was somewhere around 4 million, I think, that was spent on these type of ads, and by 2006 it was up to 15 million, and that's in legislative races, the gubernatorial race, and the attorney general race. And people are seeing that this is an easier way to funnel money into races without having to play by the same rules, and it's wrong and it has consequences. Everybody, both sides get hit by this stuff. And it seems that this would be one in everybody's best interest. And you hear from the public; they're pretty turned off by elections by the time they're done.
So, what specifically are you hoping to accomplish?
Sure. The group of 8 freshmen in the Democratic Assembly came forward with a bill that would require anything within 60 days of the election to fall under those guidelines. Okay. The issue ads you see right now for the AT&T bill and the casinos. Those wouldn't fall under this. But anything that mentions a candidate's name that would be considered electioneering would fall under this. It would require reporting who paid for the ad and the same limits that we have for other contributors.
I'm sure you anticipate opposition to this.
Yeah, you said both sides get burned by this, so is there bipartisan support?
We're still trying to get that bipartisan support. I'll be honest with you, there were some probably within my own party who weren't all that thrilled with this. Incumbency does things to people, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to come out there and tie ourselves to something right away, knowing that maybe 2-4 years from now we won't feel the same way. But it's important, and I believe in it, as do others, in it enough. And part of the problem is a lot of the people don't come from districts that are that competitive. The numbers are drawn in such a way where they're not as familiar with these ads. But it's interesting, 7 out of the 9 people, freshmen, had the exact same ads done against them, just changed the name. The same TV ad, the same radio ad, the same print ad. Pluck the name out, stick in the new one. They could probably save money on the production of those. But we can do better than this, and we should expect more.
All right. Changing gears, another major issue right now being talked about in Madison is the statewide smoking ban.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, it's been very divisive in Oshkosh and many cities and towns across the state. Where is that right now, the legislation?
It seems yesterday a lot of press came out regarding that, and that there's a full-fledged effort. The Restaurant Association was down in Madison, including local restaurants from Oshkosh coming down there pushing the statewide ban. This is a matter of when, not if. I don't know what's going to happen in this 2 years or whether it's going to happen in the next session, but if you said 3 years from now, will you have a ban passed, I would say yes. Just a matter of whether it's going to get blocked procedurally by people who feel strongly or maybe influenced by.
Does the current bill include taverns?
It does.
So smoking would be banned in taverns also?
It is. We have a couple issues here, and there's some proposals out there for an exemption, but it was a 50-50 exemption, and we know how those percentages work.
What do you support personally?
I supported the statewide ban. I met with the Tavern League.
Including taverns.
Part of it's uniformity. We have Appleton and Madison who have overwhelmingly passed their bills, and I think if we're going to treat everybody fairly, including restaurants here, I said, if you had an exemption and you said you can just have potato chips and then you can have smoking, I don't even think the taverns would be able to agree on what level of exemption was acceptable. But I'm willing to work with everybody to make sure that, maybe we wait 18 months or 2 years until we implement it to allow taverns to have the opportunity to adjust. But this thing's going to happen whether I support it or not.
Okay, but you don't think it's going to happen in this
I don't know that. It very well could, but it's going to happen by the next 3 years, I'd say.
All right, sure.
Okay. You recently started putting together like a monthly update of your activities, both past and future. And I think that that's a really good proactive type of communication to have. I wish that more would do that. You know, you've been having your press secretary, your office assistant,
Only
whatever
one
you want to
person.
call them.
Sometimes that press secretary is me.
Well, someone has been kind enough to be sending these emails to me, and I appreciate that. We've been putting them on the website. But again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks, there are some out there who just don't have access to the internet. What other means are you using to get the word out?
Well, certainly, you know, anything that we put out, we certainly go to radio and print media, but, you know, you both keep active blogs in the area, and I realize a lot of people get those sources, and I'm trying to make sure that we do that as well. But you know, sometimes no one listens to radio, newspaper, or blogs. So I've tried. You know, people who send me emails by work, I will try to include them on an email list, whether they were agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. And if they don't want to be communicating with me, I'll take them off. But if anybody would like to contact my office and receive updates, they are certainly allowed to. I encourage them to contact me. But I'm going to be doing some doors here coming up as well to try to, I really do believe we need to take this to the people. One of the great things about a district like this is it's not too big. You know, people should know their legislator. People should be involved, and I still have the opportunity to do that. At a larger level, you may not. But, when I go to the gas station, people talk to me. So
Sure.
I'm open anytime.
Well, what you're touching on, Gordon, is open government, and which is great. But one of your colleagues, Corey Mason, who's a Democrat from Madison, Racine. He's a new representative, just like you, and he's already come to the conclusion that the closed partisan caucuses are really a violation of basic open government principles, and I believe he has said they should be abolished. Now, you've sat in closed caucuses, haven't you?
I have.
All right.
And
What
Corey
goes
and I
on?
are,
What
Corey and I
tell-
are friends, sure.
What goes on in the closed caucuses?
Every day.
Every day?
No, I'm sorry. Well, days that we're in session. In other words, when the legislature is getting ready to vote on issues, we'll go, into session on the floor, and then they'll break for individual caucuses in which the Republicans go in one room and the Democrats go in another room. It is open right away as we discuss some items, but then you're right, it goes into closed caucus, meaning it's just the members in there and maybe a couple staff. In there, we hear from committee members who heard the bills, largely to brief members if they weren't aware of everything on the bill about the pro and the con side. Unlike some of the things out there, there's no consideration of politics because it's not allowed anymore. I mean, since I've been in there, no one said, you need to think about this because of money. No one's told me that you have to vote this way. But it is a way to, and there's been some pretty serious debates in there between members who disagree. I mean, I stood up in closed caucus yesterday on the AT&T bill.
But that's exactly the kind of thing citizens should be seeing. Wouldn't you agree?
There's a case to be made for that. My concern, and I've talked to Corey about this because I do support open government, and I think there are some discussions in there that should be out there. The problem is I think you will move some of the other decisions even further. I think you will get back to the smoky rooms. I think you will get back to the basement of bars where members are meeting there, and that what you see on the floor will still be more of a show than...
Well, some say we have that now, even with the closed partisan caucuses.
And I understand that. It's just, it's hard to, explain. I mean, there's some, I have mixed feelings on it because I don't know if the alternative really gets at what we're looking for. I mean, I agree. I wish we had more open debate on the floor.
Why should the state legislature, Gordon, be the only governing body in Wisconsin that is exempt from the open meetings requirement? Doesn't it fail the basic test of fairness? I mean, I'm on the Common Council now. The 7 of us can't go into a room before we meet the public and discuss the agenda, but yet the state legislature can do this.
I would just say it's more complicated.
Because there's more lobbyists and more money and all that.
There's no discussion of lobbyists, though, and there's no discussion of money. And
but what makes it more complicated? You're clearly a very intelligent guy. You demonstrated it in the last 55 minutes. So why do you need a closed session with the party leadership to discuss these issues? In closed session.
Sure.
Why can't it be done in open session?
Much of the reason is because it does allow for opportunities for questions to be asked, including individual members who may not have followed a bill. Because we have specialization that the people who have handled the bills in committee are going to speak with authority on those issues, because we have regional considerations and there are issues that people will want to consider with regards to their constituencies. But for instance, sometimes a colleague wants to propose an amendment that you may not agree with, but you think that they should have the right to propose that amendment. And so when you have a vote on whether to block that amendment on the floor, you will vote against blocking it. Some of it is, how are we going to approach this debate out there? And it does involve some strategy, and especially because I wouldn't say that you're always in lockstep on how you're going to vote on these issues, especially with the ones that we've had so far.
So it sounds like you're saying if Corey Mason thinks he's going to change and get rid of these open or closed sessions, he's dreaming. It's not going to happen.
I think everybody should closely consider what the alternative to closed caucuses is, and I'm going to tell you that I think that's a couple people in a smoky bar deciding it, and I'm happy to be in the room.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one, Gordon. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Real quickly, because we're down to our last couple of minutes here, a hospital tax is being proposed to help increase some federal funding for state health programs. Where do you stand on that?
First of all, the governor's proposal is the main goal is to increase reimbursement rates. Right now, we get about 63 cents on the dollar, and your private insurance, if you have it, pays the difference on that. So the goal is to increase reimbursement rates, which would hopefully lower everybody else's healthcare costs, and to insure more people, the people who don't have health insurance. Whether this is the best way to pay for it or not, that's what we're going to have the talks about. But it's not fair for people to say they just oppose the assessment without coming out in support of another revenue stream. I know we're wrapping it up here, but a large part of this budget and the funding for the city and the funding for the university and the funding for schools is based upon this assessment, because it takes the money from the 1%, $418 million, it brings $577 million back from the federal government, but it moves that out of the general fund, the money we pay for with sales and income tax, and allows us to fund those programs. So if this 1% doesn't go through, neither does the funding for the university or the city or the school district. So if this isn't the way to pay for it, we need to have a realistic discussion about how we should pay for it.
Okay. All right. Just one more time, I want to give folks the days and times and places of these budget workshops. For the budget workshop on the UW system, that will be on April 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Reeve Memorial Union in room 227. The discussion on K through 12 will be held May 14th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the School District Administration Building on North Eagle Street. The Medicaid workshop be held on May 21st, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Oshkosh Senior Center in the Willow Room. Discussion on shared revenue, that will be held on June 4th from 6:30 to 8:30. Not sure on the location yet, but possibly City Hall. And last but not least, the discussion on corrections, June 11th, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Oshkosh Public Library downstairs in one of the meeting rooms.
And I appreciate the opportunity to come here. And if anybody has any questions on those topics or other ones that I can, if you send them to me now, I can try to address them at those forums.
All right, good enough. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. We'll have you back. Tony, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. As always, thanks to you for letting us in your homes for the last hour. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.